interesting when you put it in that dry situation where you're having something that's really kind of light and you've got those really rich flavors like the cocoa and the vanilla, clove.
Yeah. This has got like this super long milk chocolate finish.
Cool.
It's just hanging out, and it's like, nummies.
Yeah, are those meads still or sparkling?
Sparkling. They all sparkling. At least these ones are.
Okay.
The rosemary mead you were talking about before, I think I ended up with a bottle of that as one of my You've Been a Good Volunteer presents after the Mazer Cup. And I was wondering if that was supposed to have been sparkling.
No.
No?
Some people pointed out, I guess, that at altitude that things were a little bit different, but I don't think we've had much in the way of quality problems on the rosemary. So had it been opened?
No, I'm not saying that it had spontaneously carbonated. I'm just wondering if it had been packaged, because it looked like it was in it wasn't in a regular wine bottle, so I was guessing it was bottled specifically for the competition, and I was wondering if it was supposed to have been sparkling rather than dry. I was just curious about that one.
We all of our still meads we do in 500 ml like Boston round style bottles.
Oh, okay.
So they look a little bit like apothecary.
That's exactly what it looked like. Yeah. Okay. It didn't have a regular label on it, so I was wondering if it had been something that was rebottled specifically for it. But if that's what you bottle it in, that's cool. I was just curious because I enjoyed it. I just found it a little bit drier than I like, and the rosemary, I had to be told that there was rosemary in it. I couldn't pick it out. But then again, I've also been told my taste isn't in my toes. So
it is.
Well, I think we're actually thinking about bringing the rosemary up a little bit in that, and we have tweaked it a little bit more off dry. So I can't speak to exactly which batch might have made it to the Mazer Cup, but those are two things that have at least come up, I guess, in our minds as being worth thinking about.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that my taste is sort of aligned with what you guys have been finding, too.
We had some batches that were really a good bit heavier on the rosemary at first. I think it was a little bit much for people, so we pulled in a more subtle thing, but it's also, again, it's really tough to, depending on what season, where you're getting the rosemary from, that kind of thing, to make sure that even if you put the same amount in by weight of fairly similar stuff, to make sure that your flavor is going to hit the same spot. And I've got some new equipment that I'm putting together that should help us do that a little bit more evenly, I think, to taste the way that brewers deal with hop additions. So we'll see what happens. Trying to, again, sort of figure out ways to continuously improve what we're doing.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things you're talking about, being able to be consistent, and that is one thing I've been wrestling with the whole time I've been making anything involving herbs, is trying to have some kind of consistency in how strong it ends up, because, every year is different, every handful is different, and it's a constant challenge to try to get it to be the same, to try to get it, I got it perfect once, can I get it there again, And I was just wondering if you had any insight on doing that. Like, I know some people prefer making a tincture and then adding that instead of just throwing the herbs into the meat. And I've done it both ways, and I haven't really figured out which one works best for me yet.
Oh, to be honest, I think the tincture thing, what's really happening with that is something different, probably from what the people who are doing it think is, in the sense that when they make that tincture, they're probably doing it for a short period of time, and they're using alcohol.
Or if they're making a tea, they're using hot water, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're using something to extract it, but
Mm-hmm.
what's actually probably more important is that it's a short period of time, and you're getting that flavor out, and then you're not putting any of the, other biomass or whatever you want to call it, stuff in your mead. And a lot of times, early on I tried basil, and I made the mistake of leaving it in there too long.
Mm-hmm.
When we were doing it on a real, homebrew experimental level. And I did that with a lot of stuff, with mint, with other things. And I would say that 90% of those things ended up tasting pretty terrible. And now that I know how to work with it, which is you can't leave it in there for very long without getting off notes, it's changed that. And even down to some people would think that maybe if I put the, if I grind up the rosemary or the mint or the basil, put it in a food processor, that kind of thing, is that a good idea? Probably not, because you're going to turn it into pesto, and that's a really different kind of flavor. The rosemary can get very woody and resinous, or you can have that sort of fresh, very ephemeral part of the rosemary that you would get by slapping it and putting it in a cocktail or something,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you want, and that's going to come out in a very short period of time. When we're putting lemongrass in our stuff, the lemongrass, lemony, herbaceous notes, that means that stuff is drying out while you're staring at it. So you have to put it in your product or in what you're working with, and then get it out pretty quickly. If you leave it on the table too long, all that really cool part of the flavor that's really ephemeral is gonna disappear.
Yeah.
But if you on the other side of that, if you leave that in your mead 10 days, you're going to end up with something that tastes woody and oniony. And it's going to taste terrible. So making some rules for yourself, setting alarms in your calendar, those are good things as you're experimenting with flavors and oh man, that doesn't taste at all like I wanted. Just think about what you're putting in there and what different flavors you're expecting to get out of it. And that'll, if you run into a problem, you can kind of troubleshoot by breaking that problem down into some simpler things, Yeah,
when I hear rosemary in mead, I immediately get worried because I have rosemary growing in the garden, and it's very strong. So I would imagine it's you got to be very judicious in how you add it, and I would think maybe just using the tips of the leaves or something like that. I don't know.
We don't put any stalks in there, that's for sure.
Okay.
So we strip it, and I would say it gets lightly muddled in the process, but we put a very small amount in. I think the other thing that's really difficult is, like a lot of people, when you're working with a carboy, you're constantly fighting like oxidation or introducing pollution into the mead. I've had a lot of homebrew mead and cider that people dump sulfite or Camden powder into, and they didn't know what they were. They just put in by whatever. Like, here, put this in, and it'll stop it from doing weird things.
Right.
And you could taste it, and it was, kind of ruined. It was a fault. It ruined the product. But I think there's also the other side of mead, which is that a lot of people were very reluctant to put that in because they didn't do it on the beer side of things.
Right. I was that guy.
And they, sort of there's this thought, well, it's you don't really need it. It's natural. And maybe that's true if you're working with higher alcohol stuff. But if you look at the wine industry as a whole, they put a lot of research and experience into figuring out what you should and shouldn't be doing with salt, free sulfur, and what the sensory thresholds are and that kind of stuff. So if you get a really good grip on how to look at sulfite, titrettes are a big thing that you can use at the homebrew side. You can help prevent oxidation as you're going back into your mead by sulfiting properly, and you can help prevent contamination from taking off and ruining your mead. But I think you also should, it's kind of like a beehive. You shouldn't be afraid to go into it and try out, see how that rosemary's coming along in there. And if it tastes good, pull it out. Get it out of there. Don't leave it in there to turn into something weird or land off flavors. That would be my advice with that kind of thing.
I've always been a big fan of the tea approach because it feels like you have more control.
Yeah.
Every time I've gone and thrown the actual, with a very few exceptions, every time I've thrown the herbs in there, I always have that it went 1 hour or 1 day longer than it should have, and then it's ruined. It's like it's so particular.
I'm finding I like doing that with ginger, but just about everything else it works either way. But for me, I'm finding there's a weird flavor that I get with ginger that if I put it in fresh rather than if I steep it. And I don't know if it's... Yeah, I don't know if it's because I'm leaving too much ginger biomass in for too long or what. I haven't done enough experimenting to figure out what exactly is going wrong with that.
Which is weird because it doesn't do that when you make ginger beer. When you
Well, that's the thing is when I made my smack you in the face ginger beer, I used 1 pound of ginger per gallon, and what I did was I shredded the ginger in the blender and then dropped it into boiling water and then steeped it till it was cool and then strained it. Or steeped it overnight or something like that and then strained it. And that was burn your face off ginger, and it was awesome.
I don't know if there's a particular contaminant that comes along with fresh ginger, but that was definitely one that was challenging for me when I was doing it at in a carboy using fresh ginger. And I would say that I tried it at least a half a dozen times where if I left it in thinking, well, that's cool, and when I went back to try it later, it was gross. Yeah. There was a weird off flavor that I couldn't pin, and it wasn't consistent that it would do it every time. Right. What we do now is use a ground ginger that's and we don't leave